Hello and welcome to my submission video for Awesome Games Done Quick 2022. Today we're going to go over Tetris the Grandmaster, which has had a long hiatus from GDQ events, has not been shown since 2017, in fact. In 2017, I ran this game alongside 7 others as part of an 8-way race to the GM grade. We've decided to dial it back a little bit this time around and instead are only pitching a 4-way race to the GM grade. It's going to be a lot easier over the internet. We could have theoretically pulled off 8-way with just 4 boards, but then we would have had 2 people at every single location, and that's just not feasible in the current day and age. So we're submitting a 4-way race to GM somewhat as a refresher for fans of TGM who haven't seen this game in quite a long time. And it should be a much more dynamic race given the presenters that are submitting. I'm JB Roms. We are also submitting with Pie Pusher 11, Partyman X, and Switch Palace Corner. Now, as this game starts, I'm actually not paying too much attention to what's going on in the video, and that's because this is my PB video, and in my PV video, I go for a somewhat non-marathon safe strategy of stacking up as high as I possibly can at the start to minimize the fall time of each individual piece. In a marathon environment, usually you don't want to do this. There is definitely the element of how much of this do I do for the sake of the race. But aside from going up high enough that you don't get a bad time, you don't really want to go too high because then you're going to risk actually topping out during a race, which is just never fun. So while you're witnessing some type of what you might call old school Tetris, where the pieces are just falling from the top, I'd like to draw your attention to the level counter in the bottom left. The level counter is one of the most important things in TGM. In TGM, you don't get levels per line like you do in, say, NES Tetris. You actually get levels for every piece that's dropped or line that's cleared. This game ends when you reach and clear a line at level 999. If you successfully make it to level 999 in under 13 minutes and 30 seconds with a few other conditions, you are awarded the Grandmaster grade. For this submission, we are submitting a race to that 999. Now, I just hit level 200 in the video, and we generally refer to sections of 100 levels as an individual section. It's a real good way to subdivide the game, especially so because the game's internal speed timings oftentimes only change at the 100 level mark. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, when the background changes, the speed changes. There is one exception to this, and you'll discover that soon enough, and that's after level 500, there is no speed change in this game. In the other TGM series games, there is speed change after 500, but one of the defining characteristics of Tetris the Grandmaster 1 is that at level 500, you reach instant gravity, and from that point on, the game remains at one set speed. Generally, we refer to the first 3 sections, so 0 to 100, 100 to 200, 200 to 300, as low G, aka low gravity. And then from there, we go ahead on to the 300s and the 400s. I just crossed the barrier into 300. And in the 300s and 400s, we're in what we call awkward G. This is the part where the gravity almost feels like it's instant, but is clearly not, which sometimes leads to miscalculations and thinking you can get a piece over to one side when you maybe can't, and other small mistakes like that. One of my favorites is actually thinking that a piece is going to stay where it is because it would in instant gravity, but because you're in awkward gravity, it manages to slide 1 block or 2 over further than you wanted. We call it awkward gravity because it's just honestly very awkward to control at this point in the game. I'm actually doing quite well at handling the awkward G in this video. Surprise, surprise, it's a PB run. So I'm not going to comment too much about it, but one of the things that I will say about awkward gravity is you'll sometimes see a lot more tapping, which you can see in the video if you look closely, where I'm definitely individually inputting movements rather than relying on the game's auto-shift mechanic to place my pieces. This is usually just a matter of safety. It's usually much faster to use the auto-shift in almost every circumstance. I've reached into level 400 now, where the awkward G can definitely become among the worst just because the gravity spikes somewhat high and then goes back down before the end of the section, before transitioning into the smooth, predictable instant gravity, aka 20G, when you cross into level 500. This will likely be a pivotal point in the race because with 4 people playing Tetris the Grandmaster 1 side by side, there is a good chance that at least one of us will make a small mistake or two in the awkward G sections. and that can actually be quite pitiful. Getting off pace at any point in this game usually adds up. There are a couple of players, I consider myself one of them, who have a stronger finish than start. So if I were to mess up in one of these sections and make a small mistake that, say, sets me back and forces me to clear a bunch of singles, I would then end up having to speed through the second half of the game where I'm far more comfortable. So we may have something of a comeback mechanic in this race. You can see now that I've just transitioned into level 500. We've got the nice cool background, and the pieces are behaving much more predictably. From this point on in the game, I would say there's two main components to your speed. One of them is your stacking, aka are you minimizing your number of singles? Are you able to clear as few line clears as possible, but as many lines as possible? You want to get a lot of doubles, a lot of triples, a lot of Tetrises. You don't want singles. Singles are nothing but wasted time in this game. On top of that, the other main component in your speed is your locking speed. Every one of these pieces that you're seeing is being individually locked by me. You have to press down on every single piece to lock it into place as soon as you possibly can. Once it's in the place where you want it to be locked, you just immediately lock it in. In fact, when playing this game, good players are oftentimes playing so fast that they're locking in their placements before they actually are able to visually confirm their placements due to the inherent amount of input lag in the game. We just transitioned over to section 600, so at this point the game isn't getting any faster, though I will say I feel like the backgrounds do get a little bit cooler. I've always been a big fan of this 600 background. One of the cool things about TGM, especially as a race game, is that the backgrounds usually give you a rough indication of where people are in the game without even having to look at the level. So if we've got 4 players on the screen and 3 of them are on the same background, but one of them is on a different background, that player is either almost an entire section ahead or still in the previous section. Now you may notice that I've oftentimes been building with my Tetris hole, aka well, on the right. The way that the rotation system in this game works is somewhat right biased. In order to rotate an eyepiece into the right side cleanly, you need a 2x2 available square, whereas on the left side, if you were to try to rotate the eyepiece into a corner there, you would actually need a 3x2 space. So usually most players, if at all possible, will stack to the right. There are some cases where, just because of how the RNG went, you end up having to stack to the left, and in that situation, it is paramount that you pay attention to the amount of space you have on the left-hand side. I've managed to maintain a solid right well for most of this game, thanks to the clean stacking that I've had throughout this run. Any rhythm game players who are watching this video may also notice that I do have somewhat of a consistent cadence in my piece placements. There's actually a joke that TGM is actually a rhythm game, particularly these instant gravity sections, due to how many of the placements actually require the same exact amount of time to be placed, causing players to fall into this nice rhythm where they get into a really cool flow state, oftentimes described as something similar to what people experience when playing rhythm games, or even something like pinball. My stacking throughout this entire run has been quite good. In fact, I believe I have already reached the score requirement for Grandmaster, despite 2 whole sections being left before the end of the game. Usually reaching the requirement at this point in the game means you're on a solid run, and that you haven't cooked too many singles. Not burning in this game, once again, is paramount. Every time you see me clear a single, it means I'm making a concession, basically, to the game. If I can't keep the stack clean, I will usually clear a single, but oftentimes you do have to take a risk. And one of the best things you can do in this game, instead of taking a full-blown risk, is to try and build up a double out of where you would normally clear a single. Oftentimes, if you're a little bit more patient, a better piece will come along in a better setup. So it's important sometimes that when you make a mistake to just simply keep on stacking. You have to love the background for section 800 as well. It's just a human brain. Though I gotta say, that doesn't compare at all to the incoming background for section 900. It is in fact, yes, an unborn child. I believe this is supposed to be a rendition of a star child, but I've never been quite sure. It is definitely a unique quirk of the game though, and one of my favorite parts about it is that this image will actually remain as the leaderboard background should somebody clear a GM. So we're coming up on the end of the run here, as I clear some unfortunate singles and then make an unfortunate misdrop. I'm now stuck with a left side well, and I'm being careful about how I build around it. I'm making some interesting twists. This is definitely some creative stacking that you're not going to learn from playing this mode all the time, but you will learn from playing some other Tetris the Grandmaster modes. But as you near level 999 and the end of the game is approaching, if you do have a clean stack, one of the best things that you can do for yourself in terms of time attack is to clear with as little material on the field as possible. It took you time to place all of that, and if you haven't cashed it out and cleared additional levels out of your line clears from that, it is simply wasted time left on the board. So I just hit the Grandmaster grade with a time of 10:27. I definitely won't be hitting a time anywhere near that fast during a race, just because I like to stay safe. The credits in this game let you continue playing. It's mostly just a victory lap in TGM1. This series is kind of famous for the invisible credits that appear in the later games, but in TGM1 you honestly don't even have to play through these. If you really want to, you can hold the start button and fast forward right through them. I'm excited to submit this game to GDQ once again. It's been too long since this has been on, and I found that the community has actually grown quite a bit in recent years, and now it's actually, because of its previous GDQ appearances, it's actually made quite a bit of inroads with other speedrunning communities, and a lot of the best TGM players now are actually people who are involved in speedrunning other games, which is really cool. Now, as the game finishes and I input my initials for the arcade leaderboard, I would just like to say thank you for reviewing this video, and I sure hope that I get to run this game on AGDQ 2022. Thanks.